Kia ora friends, welcome back to my studio. I'm Gina, and so far in this build I think I've probably done the easiest part, because the next part is all going to be angles. Like every single piece that I'm going to be putting into it now is basically got some type of angle on it. So I'm going to take my time. I'm going to do templates. I'm going to double check, triple check before anything goes in. Previously I've done the prototype in cardboard and it's very easy to sort of cut away anything that's overlapping. This is going to be a lot more permanent, and I'm going to be using MDF and wood that is going to be a lot more sturdy and a lot more permanent. So let's get into it. Okay, so to begin with, I'm using some balsa wood square dowels that are approximately about 6mm square or 1/4 inch square. And I'm just using my craft knife to cut these down to length. And these are going to start to make up the wall pieces around the room. So I'm going to follow pretty much the same process as I did with creating the prototype, and I'm going to create the wall pieces around the room, and then I'm going to angle the ceiling beams up against those to give me the angle. So before I do glue these into place, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a wire brush and I'm going to just rough up the texture on the surface of the beams, because I really want these to look kind of old and weathered. And this is a great little technique to use in order to create some of that weathering, and it sort of adds a little bit more grooves into the surface of the wood. Instead of being nice and completely smooth, it just adds a nice texture to it. So once I'm happy with that, first of all I'm just going to glue down the end wall, which has got the round window in it, in order for me to make sure that that's nice and square, and then I can start adding in the beam work. So for the beams, I'm just going to use a bit of wood glue and just start gluing those into place. And I'm going to use some 1, 2, 3 blocks to try and keep everything as square as possible. This is a bit like creating a foundation, and if the foundation is crooked, then everything above it is going to be a little bit off as well. So I want to try and make sure that these are as absolutely as square as I can possibly make them. For the beams that sit across the top, I'm actually going to just measure those in place and then cut them to length. And then for the corners, what I'm going to do is cut a notch out of each end, which is basically going to cut halfway down through the middle of the beam and then the same width as the beam itself. So I'm kind of cutting out a notch, and then I'm going to cross them over onto the corners so that it creates a nice clean corner. Hopefully this makes a little bit more sense when you can sort of see it in place. I'm going to do that for all of the corners in this build. So just while that is drying, what I'm going to do is just take some alcohol markers and start colouring in the window. So I've got a reference photo of the actual window, and I'm trying to replicate that as close to it as I possibly can. The colours come out a little bit light, but it definitely adds the detail of all of the different colours in the window, because they're not necessarily solid colours. Some of them have got stripes through them, and we've got a mixture of blue and purple and pink and yellow, just to really add to the detail. I wanted to just touch on this morning. So I'm really happy with progress so far. We've got the beams for the walls in place, which are these pieces here. And today I'm going to work on the roofline beams. Now what I was going to do with the floor was have the beams come down and sit on that to give me the angle. But there's actually not enough gap in between where the wall comes down and the ceiling beams come down. So I'm going to bring it out just slightly, which will give me a little bit more of an angle. So this is almost up, straight up and down. And if I bring it out a little bit further, it's going to give me a bit more of an angle. But what that does mean is that the flooring is too short, and I'm going to have to extend this out a little bit. Luckily, I've got enough around the edge. It just means I'm going to take up a little bit of that, but I think it's going to be worth doing that for the overall look and to get a little bit more of an angle on this roof line. So let's get into today. So for the really long beams, I've just actually cut these to length. Now I've cut them longer than the prototype because I felt that the roof was actually not high enough, but actually I think these might be a little bit too long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave them long to really exaggerate the height of the ceiling. And now that I've got these all prepped, I can start gluing them into place. And for these ones, I'm using a right angled ruler, and just to, again, to make sure that everything is at right angles to each other. And here you can see the difference of that really flat edge and the detail that the wire brush can actually put in there. And then I'm just going to work my way around and add in all of these roof supports, which is going to give me the angle for the roof line. For where the window is going to go, I've just made this little T-shaped, which is going to be at the same angle as the main beams, and then just going to add a little horizontal beam as well, just for the window to be able to sit onto. So for the corner pieces, this was a little bit more trickier to kind of try and work out because the beams actually started to overlap each other. So what I decided to do was use the corner piece as the main beam that goes all the way through, and then just cut the two side pieces, or the pieces that kind of butted into it, off on the angle in order them to be able to fit together nicely. This actually helps secure the corner up, and it seems to work really well. For the very top piece, what I've done is I've created a rectangle using the same corner technique, so cutting out those little notches in each one and then overlaying it into the corner. And what I can do now is start gluing this into place. So this allows me to try and square up the very top, because some of the pieces of wood do tend to bend out of shape a little bit. And I've got my little level that I can use to make sure that it's in place, and you can see I've used some pins to kind of secure it in while the glue is drying. So adding in these cross beams actually helps firm up the whole structure as well, and these are definitely part of the detail in the final build. I've got some more beams to add in, which I will do in a later stage. And now it's time to give it a paint while I can still get to a lot of these areas. So I sort of thought this is the best time to do it, because otherwise once I get the exterior on, I'm not going to be able to get into all of those little nooks and crannies. So I thought this was the perfect time to get in and get all that painting done. So for the exterior, I'm using the same stir sticks that I used for the floor, and I've actually pre-painted these already, because again I felt that trying to get into all of the little corners, especially at this scale, was potentially going to be quite a challenge. And so I'm just sort of layering these up and cutting them to size and around the window. What I end up by doing later on is I actually end up by taking these two side pieces off, but I'll get to that in a moment. So for the windows, what I've done is I've printed off a couple of shapes in from my Cricut, and I can put a link to this file in the description. And again, I'm using a CD case for the actual glass. So I'm just going to stick this into place, and then I'm going to use some little angle cutters. They're actually sprue cutters. They've got a nice little flat edge to them, and I'm just going to use those and slowly snip around and sort of break away the plastic of the CD case, and this gives me a really good shape for the glass. And actually this worked out incredibly, like a lot better than what I thought it was going to be. And I'm just going to use the same window shape for the other side, so the vinyl is actually on both sides of the CD case to give me the glass. For the frames, I'm also going to use my Cricut. This was absolutely a godsend for this project, and actually the paper wasn't quite long enough, which you can actually see there, that's going off the thing. But it has been absolutely just the best tool to have to get cut out all of these shapes. So this is just cardstock. The only thing with the Cricut Joy is that it only really is good for cardstock. It doesn't really cut any thicker material. And what I'm doing here is just layering up the different layers in order to create the frame. So I've got one slightly larger than the other to create a little bit more definition, and then once I've got the glass in place, it's really starting to look like a metal frame, which is what I was wanting to do, taking inspiration from the round window that I've done and actually creating some couple of layers. So I'm really happy with that, and now I can move on to creating the roof line for the dormer window. So what I've done here is I've just taken a piece of scrap paper, cut that down to what I think is the right size, and then I'm just putting this into place just to check to see if it's the right size. So I'm using a piece of balsa wood. This is really thin balsa wood. So I'm just using that template and just mapping that out. And this will allow me to bend it around the curve of the window. Using the same coffee stir stick so that I've used for the walls and the floor, just to line the interior of that dormer roof. And then once I'm happy with that and I've got all the layers together, then I can glue these into place. And then that is the little dormer window basically complete. So I'm really happy with how this has turned out. And just to finish off the window, I need to cover where you can see the ends of the stir sticks. So I'm just using again another piece of balsa wood, slightly thicker this time, and I'm going to glue that just over those very ends to give it a nice finish. And then once I'm happy with that, I'm just going to give it a paint, and then it's done. So one thing I realised when I went to go and put these into place is that I needed to shave a little bit off each side of the walls that I'd put into place. So I'm actually just going through it and taking off all of those side pieces that I'd put in. So now I've got the window sitting in place, I can go through and just cut those down ever so slightly and put all those wall pieces back into place, and then I can continue on and build out the wall right up to the top of the roof, and I can do that on both sides now, which I'm really happy with. So I'm really happy with how this has turned out. The window I can actually take in and out. It's not permanent glued into place just yet, because I do want to put some more details on the window before I fix that completely into place. Here I've got a whole stash of stir sticks that I've pre-painted, and I'm just going to slowly work my way each side up to the top of the roof. So one last thing before I finish up for this particular video is I do want to do these two side walls, and I'm using basically the same process as I've done for the dormer roof. So I'm just cutting these pieces of balsa wood into place. This is a slightly thicker balsa wood, and sticking the stir sticks into place after I'd painted the background, so that if there are any gaps, then at least it doesn't show through. So this project has absolutely taken a little bit longer than I had anticipated, but I'm really happy with where it is at right now. So if you found this video helpful, hit that like button. It really does help the channel. And while you're there, consider subscribing. I post a video every week. Have a fabulous week, everybody, and until next week, I'll see you then. Bye for now.